Harp's house. In your eardrum. Man, wherever you want me to be.
You're now listening
to Harp's house. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another segment of Harp's House. I'm here with my great friend and lovely guest, Dr. Ali. She is a entertainment and mental health expert, and she has her Ph.D. in clinical psychology from Loma University. She's trained at hospitals including Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and Kaiser Permanente. Now, Dr. Ali, we're going to be talking about, of course, relationships, and we're going to kick it off. But I just want to thank everybody again for listening in their car, on their way to the gym, on their way to work. Anywhere you are, I really appreciate your time because you could have been listening to anybody else. So, Dr. Ali, let's get it going. Talk to me about relationships, and we were talking a little bit earlier on the numbers and the statistics associated with marriage today. What you got today?
Well, so you and I were going to talk a little bit about like stats, numbers, and one thing I really wanted to focus on is how things can be so much better when you're married. And I know it's like, I'm not trying to like convince anybody for real, but I feel like everyone's talking about the exact opposite. But I really wanted to be that one voice that says, no, it's okay. You can get married. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay. Not everyone's getting divorced.
See, that's interesting because today it would seem like there's so many options out there and marriage would be the last person on a young person's mind. Because, of course, our generation, we're the millennials, and the generation right below us, they're considered Generation Z. So do you really think young kids will still have that incentive to get married when they get older?
You know, I feel like they might not. Honestly, I feel like the way things are going, our generation, the millennial generation, really saw our parents getting a lot of divorces. Our parents were really the first generation, the baby boomers, the first generation that, you know, raised the divorce stats, you know, from 40% into 50%. And I think now, aren't we somewhere around 60%?
I think so. I'm like you said, I'm sure it's at least half, so it's probably going up for sure.
Yeah. And so we lived in that generation. You know, I'm not from a home of divorce, and I don't think you are either.
Nope, yeah.
But a lot of our friends, I mean, I think most of my friends are from parents who had separated at some point in time. So I think our generation really lost their focus on marriage. And not that I think it's like the end-all, be-all, because I don't think people should get married for the sake of getting married, right? And I think that that's the difference.
Right.
Is like, for example, my little sister, she's 10 years younger than me. She got married before I did, and everybody made a big deal about it. Like, oh, your sister beat you to the aisle. She beat you down the aisle. Like, oh, how could you let this happen? And my perspective was, it's not a race. I'm not racing anybody down the aisle.
Right.
You get married. Marriage isn't a goal. Marriage is a result of a healthy relationship.
Right. But I feel like a lot of young women do feel like that marriage is a goal, and it kind of completes them. That's why they put so much stock and so much energy and so much money into their marriage and the show of it and the actual ceremony.
Absolutely. And I think that that's when we start to have problems where you start to see divorce rates, right? When it becomes more about being married than actually finding someone worthy of marrying.
Right. That makes sense.
Because there are lots of benefits to marriage. Like, for example, being a single mother. You know, being a mother is one of the most amazing things that can happen to a woman. I mean, I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends do, and it is absolutely transformative. But there are lots of studies that show that women who raise their kids by themselves have higher rates of depression than women who are married. And not even like people who cohabitate, actually married.
Right.
Because I would think that a lot of the stats would be different and be like, oh, but if you're cohabitating with someone that you support and you love, then it would be the same. Not at all.
So playing house is not the same equivalent as being actually married in terms of those stats.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So, why do you think our parents generation, because like you said, a lot of my friends, their parents are divorced for one reason or another. Why do you think that generation started to kind of go on their own and split up more than their parents did?
You know, when you look at the societal changes that happened when our parents were young in the 50s and the 60s, you saw a big push toward women becoming more independent. And like toward when our parents were old enough to get married in the 70s, right?
Right.
And so now we have women who are empowered with birth control, you know, with the ability to have abortions if they had an unwanted pregnancy. They were more encouraged to go into the working world. In the 80s, we actually had the most women in college. The late 70s, actually, early 80s, we had the most women in college of any time in the history of the United States. And so we had this huge push towards women being independent. And so women were no longer forced to stay in marriages they didn't want to be in.
Right.
It's not that in the 50s people were more happy, or in the 20s they were more happy, but it wasn't socially appropriate for a woman to divorce and be single. And so it was just something that you saw less often.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that a lot of women of our grandparents' generation and the generation before that, do you think they just stayed in marriages that were crappy because they really had no other options and that was just like the status quo in society?
Some did. Absolutely, some did.
Yeah.
You know, I can't speak to, I haven't seen any stats on that actually, but I can't speak to that exactly. But I could imagine that absolutely, that people stayed there because that's what they were expected to do. And our parents' generation was the first generation where you didn't have to stay in a marriage that you didn't like. And so now I feel like it's our generation's responsibility to figure out what a good, healthy marriage looks like.
Right.
Because there are so many benefits to being in a happy marriage. And
So-
not just like in a marriage, an actual happy, communicative, like mutual marriage.
So yeah, like what, like you say, a happy marriage. What does that look like generally, or does it depend on the actual couple?
I think it depends on the actual couple. I think that we have a lot of these old standards. You know, marriage is, you know, the husband's working, the wife is staying at home with 2.5 kids. You know, but I think now it can be so different. We have couples that I know that are exceedingly happy. One lives in New York, one lives in LA. Some people can do it.
That's a stretch though. Like on two separate coasts.
I know people. I know a couple that is married and madly in love, but they're entertainers, and they work on opposite sides of the country.
Gotcha.
And if one were to move to the other coast, they would be unhappy because they wouldn't be able to work.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But they're madly in love, and they meet up all around the world and have these delicious and amazing rendezvous, you know, in other countries, and it's just it works for them.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's a unique situation because they can afford to do all that. But like a computer programmer and like a waitress, they're not meeting up all around the world and getting it popping in the south of France.
They might not be.
Yeah, no. But no, I get that. Like you said, I mean, that would be the same as, like you said, a superstar entertainer with a stay-at-home dad. Of course, she can afford to fly the husband out whenever he wants to versus somebody who works in like sales in Atlanta and somebody who works in sales in like Michigan.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, it has to work for you. You know,
Right.
And the one thing that does intrigue me that I can't wait to see how the stats evolve on polyamorous relationships. So relationships that involve more than two people.
So
I can't wait to see how those end up. Those are more and more frequent.
wait, okay, let's back up. You said polyamorous?
Yes.
Okay, so give me an example of that.
So a polyamorous relationship. So let's say there's a couple and they are married, man and woman.
Right.
And then there's another boyfriend involved in this marriage. So there's a woman, a wife, a husband, and a boyfriend. That would be an example of a polyamorous relationship.
But is that a
Or
marriage?
Well, according to American law, no. You
Right.
cannot have three people involved in a marriage, but you can have two people dating another person.
Right. So it's technically a marriage, but they're acting like they're dating.
I guess.
Yeah, that would be
And
interesting.
I think it would be different for them. They may even feel like it's a marriage between all three of them.
Would that generally happen more with a man, a wife, and a girlfriend?
I think that most of the time that is what I see. But there have been ones where there's two men and a woman.
Huh. That's interesting. I feel like that would only be acceptable if the man made a lot of money.
I don't know. Man, I don't know. A lot of these people do not. A lot of people do not make a lot of money. People are struggling. But
I can't see like a lower middle class bartender coming home to his wife and being like, "Hey babe, I want to get it popping and I need another girlfriend," and her being like, "It's cool."
You would be surprised, man. There are these subcultures in the American society that go, as most subcultures do, very unrecognized.
Okay.
Where things like this are happening, and I'm not jumping to conclusions and saying that these marriages will be unhealthy or these relationships will be unhealthy, but the typical dynamic that humans have evolved to be comfortable with is one partner with another partner, typically male and female, but female and female relationships have proven to be some of the most stable relationships. Male and male relationships have proven to be amazingly stable and loving, just like, heterosexual couples. And so I feel like, we can't sit here and say that these things can't work until we give them a chance, right?
Right. That's true. That's true. I see. I don't know because I feel like men. Now this is a generalization, and it can change and it can and morph. But I feel like a lot of men conform to dating one woman because that's pretty much how society works, and that's what's expected, and that's what's accepted from the woman. Because anything else, a
Yeah.
lot of times the woman is like not going for it.
Well, because in our culture, that's what we know,
Right.
right? In other cultures, there are, concepts where marriages are more open.
Hmm.
And for them, that's very healthy. But for an American, that might not be as healthy. And so that's why I'm just like really curious to see kind of as our concepts of love and connectedness expand, kind of what we're going to see and what's going to be healthy. Because right now, dyadic relationships that are supportive and cooperative have been found to be the most healthy. And dyadic marriages, like actually people who have been married over the course of they did a study where they measured their health, their perceptions of health at like 5 years of marriage, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. And they found that people who were married to the same person throughout all the questioning
Right.
were more healthy, physically healthy.
You said dyadic. What does that mean?
Two people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it just means that, a dyadic relationship is two people involved. So they actually were more physically healthy. So it's not even just mental health, but your body is impacted greatly by your mind.
I heard once, it was on some special I saw, that marriage and the concept of love is used as a way of establishing order in society. So people aren't just wilding out, having sex and dating and just kind of just doing whatever. And it establishes some sort of structure in society. Do you think that's true or no?
I could see that being the case. I could see that definitely having something to do with it. And I think at a deeper level, it's wired into our DNA.
Hmm.
Right? It's evolutionary. That's the way we have procreated for a very long period of time.
Hmm.
And it is actually possible for a woman to get pregnant by two men, but it's very, very rare.
Wait, okay, so
Yes.
so if she's having sex with two men simultaneously, not at the same exact time in time, but just like if she has two sexual partners throughout the course of a relationship, she can get pregnant by both of them.
Technically, yes, it has happened. Very, very rare. Like, it's very rare, but a woman can be pregnant, have sex with her husband, and get pregnant again. There have been
What?
cases of women giving birth to two children that are like maybe 2 weeks apart.
Oh, wow.
Very rare, but yes, this can happen. And I think that one of the reasons that we've evolved to have one partner at a time was because for so long in our history, for hundreds of thousands of years since we've been around, we haven't had any way to determine paternity.
Right. True.
And in certain societies, particularly European society, that was very important. Whereas in certain African cultures, the idea of children out of wedlock wasn't really a problem because the entire community came together to raise kids.
Okay.
And so in our cultures, in Western Africa and places like that, it was more acceptable for children to kind of like belong to the community. Whereas in European cultures, the idea of it was very individual.
Okay.
And so the idea of that being your child was very, very important. So that is kind of where we get this concept of this, like, we have to have a marriage, you have to stay together kind of idea.
Gotcha. So with the paternity, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about what if it was standard for every woman to take a paternity test with her perceived husband or mate in the delivery room? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't see why it would matter, but I think if you are...
Yeah, I think it would hugely matter if the man thinks he's the father and he's not.
But how often is a man not the father of his child? I think that is honestly such a minority that it would to me, it would be a waste of resources.
I don't know. You never know. You just want to be sure.
So you think your wife, why would you want to be married to a woman who you couldn't trust would be carrying your child? See, and there goes to healthy versus unhealthy relationships. If you're in a relationship and you don't trust your wife,
okay, let me back that up.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not just your wife. If you're involved with someone and she says, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and you're just taking her word as face value, and she says it's yours, that's different.
Well, yeah, in those circumstances, I feel like if the baby doesn't come out looking exactly like you, maybe I could see somebody being interested in getting a paternity test. But I think across the board paternity test, waste.
Gotcha. I guess, like you said, a waste of resources. Because, like you said, who would pay for it? I guess that's what it always comes down to.
Yeah, who would pay for it? But I feel like if you're questioning, then I say go for it.
Why do
Who
you
am I
think?
to tell you not to?
I was looking at some numbers according to a U.S. Department of Labor study in 2007 on marriages, and it says people who are more educated seem to stay together longer than people who are less educated. Why do you think that's true?
I think that's always been a really interesting statistic, but I think a part of it is because I don't think being educated makes you smarter necessarily, right? I don't believe that. But I think what it does is it teaches you a level of distress tolerance.
Okay.
And it teaches you to cope with people that are different from you because you're forced to go to a university. You're forced to, finish high school. So that means you have to work with people who are different from you and learn how to communicate the way they want you to communicate.
But that's interesting because generally speaking, don't people who are less educated get married a lot younger, like fresh out of high school or right after high school versus people who have upper level degrees and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They do tend to get married younger, whereas people who are in school tend to get married in their late 20s, early 30s, between 28 and 32.
Right.
With actually the most stable and long-term relationships are people who get married between the ages of 31 and 32.
Wow, that makes sense. Because, like you said, at that point, you kind of know who you are, you're comfortable with yourself, and you know who your mate is because you guys are pretty much set in your ways. There's not going to be some dramatic shift versus, like you said, I'm sure who you were at 21 is not who you are at your current age. So,
and that's absolutely why I think divorce rates have changed so much too. Is the age of humans. We can get so much older now. So you marry someone at 18 and you don't die until you're 95.
right.
So you're with somebody for 80 years.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And do you know how many transitions you go through in 80 years? And you have to also guarantee that the person that you're married to goes through the exact same types of transitions and accepts all of your changes. It's a hard notion to believe, and maybe marriage will evolve to where you have partners for different phases of your life.
I find it fascinating when somebody has been with their mate for, like you said, 50 years, and then one of for instance, the wife dies, and the husband starts dating a couple months later and has a new girlfriend. I'm just like, yo, that's so crazy. You're with a woman for 50 years, she passed, and you're back on the block in 3 months, 6 months. But I guess that's life.
Strange. Yeah. But it's got to be strange to me, just to think, it's like working out a muscle that you haven't worked in 50 years.
Right. You haven't dated in, like you said, 50 years, and all of a sudden you're maybe not on Tinder, but you're back trying to date. That must be a really foreign concept to try and entertain another woman and try to find out what she likes and, who she is as a person.
Retirement homes are some of the places that have the highest level of STD transmissions.
Oh, they're getting it in. What else is there to do?
Getting it in. Their partners have died, so they don't feel guilty. No one's, they didn't just divorce them. Partners passed away, and no need to wear condoms because nobody in here is getting pregnant.
I was going to say, I guess they figure, why am I going to put a condom on? I'm 70.
Yeah, 70. What's the risk? What's the worst thing that can happen?
Man, yeah, that's crazy. So, yeah, why do you think, I saw another stat that said men who earned a bachelor's degree were more likely to marry than men who were less educated. Why do you think that's true?
Well, I think that's really an interesting one, right? And I would have to start kind of contemplating and processing that from the perspective of what does somebody who has a bachelor's degree need that somebody who doesn't have a bachelor's degree doesn't need. Mm-hmm. And I think a part of it is maybe additional support, and you realize, as you're moving through life, that you want someone to be kind of by your side. So that's one. And then two, I think that they're also more attractive to women. And that for men, there's an evolutionary desire to pass along your genetics to a woman that is fit to carry your genes, right? So she has to be young, attractive, she has to look healthy, weight-to-tip ratio, all that stuff, so she can carry your genes.
Right.
But for women, we have not evolved to really be too concerned about physical appearance. We're more concerned about survival. So can our husband help us survive? Especially in the chance that, and because for 9 months of my life, and honestly, pregnancy really lasts around 10 months. So for a year of my life, I may have to be in a bed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might be bedridden for a year because of a baby. And if my husband cannot help us survive, we will die. We will surely die.
That makes sense.
And back in the day, survival used to mean you were the biggest, the baddest. You could kill the most people and take the most land and loot and protect your family.
But now it's transferred into the most educated and the most, like you said. And chances are, if you're the most educated, you have more money because, like you said, that matters the most.
Yeah. And it's important because if you're down for 10 months and you can't make money, you can't be living under a bridge. Yeah,
you need to rely on somebody who can make money without you out there working.
Hence the mental health issue, right? If you're down and you're sick and something's wrong with your pregnancy and there's nobody else to support you,
right?
Nobody to take up that extra slack,
right?
What do you do?
Yeah.
Or if you've had this kid and now it's just you and this kid and you have to work and there's no one to watch them. I know women who make very good salaries and basically pay their entire salary to a nanny.
Yeah, I've heard that childcare is astronomical now, and it's just getting more expensive as the days go on, which is crazy to me.
I have a friend who pays her entire check to her health, the person who's taking care of her child, the agency. So her husband works, she works, and basically her entire check goes there. So she's kind of like, I might as well just come home.
Yeah, she might as well just be a stay-at-home mom until her kids start school, for that matter. But like you said, that's not a foreign story. I've heard some stories like that where I'm like, man, daycare costs that much? It's like more than almost like a house note, like rent.
Yeah, and then because then right after that you got to start paying for their school.
Yeah. See, my kids going to public school.
Hey.
I'm planning it out now. Yeah, no, I gotcha. Well, look, let's take a break because we had a lot of good stuff in that first segment. Let's take a break and we're going to come back and I'm going to ask you about how often do you think women really turn down a marriage proposal, or how often do you think they actually don't go through with the marriage? Because I know I have my preconceived, I guess you would say, notion about this concept that I'm willing to bet you have something completely different. So we'll be right back on the other side of the break. We're back at Harp's house on this special segment of relationships with Dr. Allie. Now, Dr. Allie, how often do you think women really turn down a marriage proposal, or they just don't end up going through with it?
There's this article in the Daily Mail, and they actually found that about 1/4 of women who are proposed to say no.
That's so bizarre to me because whenever you see it on TV or friends and family, it's always she said yes. Like, you rarely see the girl that's like, nah, I'm good.
I know it's something we don't talk a lot about because I think that it's embarrassing for people because, men are putting themselves out there when they ask, but it is up to the woman to identify, like, is this the man that I can spend time with? And, I've definitely known, I know people in my personal lives who have said yes, but really weren't totally sure about it, and then later on said no.
Okay, so they say yes to the proposal for the actual show of it, just not to crush the man's soul. But then when they think about it and they have time to step back, they're like, nah, this might not be the best decision for both of us.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that it can be devastating, but I think that's better than getting divorced down the line.
And I feel like we were saying earlier, I feel like years past, women would go through with it because they put so much stock in marriage and having a family and starting a family. Yeah. But now, like you said, you can have a professional woman that doesn't feel like a marriage completes her. She'll be fine on her own.
Exactly. And I think that the duality is really interesting in that so many people feel like they're okay without a marriage, and I believe that so many people are. But what's so interesting to me is the studies show that when you're married, you're healthier, you're physically healthier, you're mentally healthier, you have more sex. That's one stat that I always love because people are like, oh, if you get married, you're never going to have sex again. Your sex is going to be horrible. Au contraire, sex is better and there's more frequent sex when you're married than when you're single
Well,
or
yeah, because your
cohabitating.
mate, yeah, like you said, you're cohabitating and your mate is right there with you.
Yeah, every day. You don't have to look for a new girl. You're not like searching the clubs,
Right.
looking through Tinder and having like dry spells.
Right, right. So do you think the concept of marriage is technically outdated for, like I said, Generation Z, which are the current kids, and then our generation, which is the millennials? Do you think it's slowly becoming outdated, even though the numbers and the stats show that life is more enjoyable and healthier when you're married?
I think that our generation is definitely doing a number on marriage,
Right.
where I think that we are opting to cohabitate more.
Hmm.
And I also think it's very regional because when you get to places like the Midwest and the South, people do tend to get married more often than people on the coast.
Right. For sure. For sure. I mean, I guess, like you said, that also has to do with education levels because education in the South and the Midwest is typically a little lower, statistically speaking,
True.
versus places like California or New York City.
True. True.
Gotcha.
Very true.
So what do you think the internet plays with that? Do you think since people just have more options in terms of Facebook and apps that they feel like they can just date around and there's always somebody that they can hook up with or go out if it doesn't work out. So there's no incentive to really stay and work it out with that current person.
I absolutely agree. And I think that when you, like, for example, grow up in, like, a small town and you kind of know all the people that you're going to know, like, they say the average person dies within about 10 miles of their home, like the average American.
Right.
So then I think that you kind of say, okay, and I hate to use the word settle, but you say, like, okay, so, this guy, I've known him for this many years, and he's really stable, and he's really nice, and he's really sweet, and I'm going to choose him. He's a really nice guy. But then once you open it up to the entire world,
Right.
so now there's 7 billion people
Right.
and let's say so you're heterosexual, interested in men, now you have almost 4 billion people you could date.
Well, yeah, I mean, just like you said, just on a literal sense, 30 years ago, you had just the people who you were around and maybe a plane ride. But now you have, like you said, hundreds of people in your phone, on the computer, literally at your fingertips every day. So it's a completely different world we live in. So like you said, I think people have far less incentive to stay and work it out or try to, like you said, figure it out with the person they're dating versus I don't have to deal with this, I'll find somebody else. But then you don't want to be that person who's, I'm just going to find somebody else and you wake up 50 with nobody.
Yeah. But, I do support people being picky because I've always been, I believe you choose wisely and treat kindly.
Okay.
Dr. Laura used to always say that. I feel like you sit back and you wait and you wait and you wait. You date people, you try people out, you see how they act, how they function under stress, and if you see something you don't like early on in a dating experience, I say don't sweat it. Just find somebody that does something that's more, within your concept of like what's valuable to you. And I also think that's the key is you have to know yourself.
But that's a fine line, though, right?
Value.
I feel like that's a fine line because you don't want to be the girl that's always like, he doesn't really line up with everything that I want, so I'm just going to date somebody else. Because at some point, you're like, well, nobody's perfect, so what's the fine line of like, well, he's not perfect, but I can grow with him versus I don't have time to deal with him, I'll just find somebody new. What's that I guess you would say that delicate balance?
I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's about understanding your needs versus your wants. Mm-hmm. So, like for me, I need someone who will communicate with me.
Okay.
And for other people, that might not be their need. That might just be like, okay, that would be nice if we communicated, but I really want a man to be loyal, So
Right.
I say find your top 3 things that you cannot live without. Like
Right.
I also knew I needed a man that was very intelligent. Because for me, exchanging knowledge and exchanging ideas is like the most attractive thing in the world.
Gotcha.
And so, so that's something that another woman would not care about.
Right. Because like you said,
and so it's just about finding it.
Some women just want a man that's going to be able to take care of them and they feel financially secure and they'll never have to really wonder where their next meal is coming from and they know they'll always have a roof over their head and they place that above intelligence level of their mate.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so it's just about knowing your things. And I like to work in 3s. So I say, find 3 things that you cannot live without. And then find 3 things that you would love to have. And then 3 things that it's like, okay. So you have these groups of like must have, would like to have, and then really don't care so much about. And try to have them be things that are actually characterological. So things about a person's personhood, not just like sexy, great abs, because those things go away. Those
Right.
things go away.
Right.
Something that will stick with a person. Someone like core values. Fidelity, loyalty, hardworking. Good work ethic. God fearing. Spiritual. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever is important to you. Something that a person can't just eat too many pizzas
And that'd be
and not
gone.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's nice to find a girl with a nice butt, but I mean, come on, she's going to be 70 one day. Is she really going to have the same butt her whole life?
True. That's true. Do you think women who are, like you said, more independent and more self-sufficient, do you think they really don't mind kind of growing up and not having children and not having a husband, or they say that because that's unfortunately a lot of women's reality? Because, like you said, for instance, a lot of black women what is it? You guys are the most educated group in our society, right? Isn't that what the stats show?
Yeah. We're getting the most degrees at the fastest rate, and we are marrying the least.
Right. So, yeah, why do you think that is?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. I've actually read a lot of articles about this. Especially considering I just got married a year ago, so I was one of those women like, what's going on? but I would say it's a few things. One, there's obviously a very traumatic history that African Americans have with one another, and there is a new title that a lot of psychologists have been kind of bouncing around with, which is post-slavery stress disorder.
Okay.
And I think that is a huge part of kind of a contention that has developed, I think, between black men and black women. Okay. So I think that's one thing. And I think another thing is that black women are socialized to stay within the race.
And black men are not.
And black men are not.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with dating outside of the race, but I just think that we're not so much socialized to do that. And I think if we were more socialized to do that, you would probably see black women marrying more outside of the race. So then the numbers would be a little bit more imbalanced, but we're kind of waiting. And then and then the third thing is when you have women who are educated, women tend to want someone, again, that can protect them. And the way to protect somebody now is with money. And we also have African American males that have a higher incarceration rate than any other group in the country. And after you've been incarcerated, it is difficult to come out and provide.
Right. Huh.
Unfortunately, you've served your time, you did what you had to do, and you come out and you get nothing for it. You get nothing.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate, and it's hard for you to reintegrate into society. And so a woman, has her master's degree and she's doing it, and it's going to be hard for her.
Yeah.
To end up possibly taking care of somebody, and then your girls look at you like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And so it can be very hard. Not saying that you shouldn't marry someone who's been incarcerated. I don't think that's the case at all. But I think that these are some factors that kind of lead to some of these numbers and stats that we see.
Do you think a lot of the strong, independent women or women who say, like you said, they don't need a man, they can do stuff on their own, do you think deep down inside they really want a man? It's just they just haven't found one yet?
I can't speak to that, but I could imagine so. But it's like studies show that you're healthier in marriage, right?
Right.
For whatever reason, for whatever reason that is. And I think that we're in a society where we are doing okay by ourselves.
I think people like sharing, though. They like sharing their money, their wealth, their happiness with a significant other. So like you said, I think that goes with marriage.
Yeah, I agree. We do like sharing. And it's like, you can share with your girlfriends and with your mutual friends. But there is something about having that person that is down for you no matter what.
Right.
But that's not to say that marriage is always the answer, because you can be in a marriage and your husband can be the worst person ever. Your wife could be the worst.
Right.
And you're not going to be healthy and happy at all in a circumstance like that. And so I really want to go back to the notion that we have to choose very wisely. You have to really be purposeful about dating.
Right. I got you. Well, I think that's enough this go round. We've given the gang at Harp's house a bunch to think about, a bunch to talk to their friends. And you guys, I really want you to I guess you would say, email this out, forward it out to your friends. Really have some talking points. Hell, get some people together and just listen to our podcast in a group, and just use it as like a roundtable discussion to get some conversations going. So again, thanks for listening to Harp's House. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and I'm with my guest, Dr. Ali. If you want to email us, you can email us at harpshouse1@gmail.com. You can also follow our podcast. That's Harp's House. That's on the iTunes Store. That's also Google Play. Or you can check out my website. You can subscribe there. That's harpshouse.com. Again, that's harpshouse.com. Again, thanks again for listening. Forward this out. Tell your friends about it. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell everyone you know. I really appreciate the love, and we will see you next week. God bless.